being here. I always love to start with a moment of gratitude for you, for the work that you are doing in the community. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know anytime we gather, whether it's frontline, learning collaborative, or in these training experiences, our intention is always to create ease and connection and provide you with information to help you expand your capacity so that together we can resolve homelessness. My name is Jody. I am the Learning and Development Specialist here with SSF. And again, thank you for being with us today. Today we get to kick off another round of our CAS Assessor training series. This is for the new CAS assessors that are just starting to get into this work. And this is an annual certification program. So some folks on our call today and the next several trainings have also previously been with us. So you will hear me say certification and recertification. So with that, I'll get into a few more housekeeping items. So this is a 6-part series. Today, of course, we're kicking off with CAS 101 and best practices. And next week, we get into an introduction to HMIS assessments and how to maneuver in the system, some reports and job aids. And then we'll also be covering the ISP, which we'll touch on today as well, individualized service plan. We're going to do our best to not use too many acronyms and remind us, drop it in the chat if we like, oh yeah, okay, let me spell it out for you. So this is being recorded and closed captioned as we do with all of our trainings. And we encourage you to use the emojis. We love those. And please be sure to use the chat when invited for engagement practices and use the Q&A specifically for your questions. At the end of each section, we leave time to answer your questions. So please be sure to drop it in the Q&A box specifically. Throughout the training, you'll see these little yellow bookmarks on the page. That's for you to remember this is going to be on your certification quiz. So just keep an eye out for those. And as I mentioned, today's training is 2-part, CAS 101 and best practices. Our 101 is really going to touch on your roles and responsibilities as a CAS assessor. We'll get into a little bit of process and tools and resources. Then we'll have a short break and we'll get into our best practices with the housing conversation tool, assessments for support, which one is which, and of course, best practices for data management. And with that, I will turn it over to Teresa Bible. Thank you so much.
Yes. Good morning. So nice to see so many people showing up for today's training. My name's Teresa, and I am the PSAP specialist here at SAC Steps Forward. I'm happy to be here and to provide this training. So we'll move forward. Today, we're going to be talking about understanding the coordinated access system, which we'll be referring to it as CAS. Next slide. So, what is the coordinated access system and why are we using it now? Basically, CAS was a network designed to match people who were experiencing homelessness with shelter, housing, and other service options. CAS helps connect those people with the highest needs in our community to housing and support services as quickly as possible. So we make sure through CAS that they are provided access, that we're able to provide assessments to find out exactly their specific needs and their Once we find out those needs, then we're able to prioritize them. And once we're able to determine their vulnerability factors and housing barriers, then we're able to refer those clients to our housing programs. Next slide. So, how does CAS work? So, CAS comes into two different separate options. So, first, we do our triage and crisis assessment. So, what does that mean? We do an initial assessment of service and the needs, and we connect those clients to crisis resources based on those assessments. Um, there is currently not enough beds in our community to support all the unhoused people. Um, we do our best to keep those beds filled every night, and we work in conjunction with 211 to keep those beds filled. Um, we definitely have something in place that when we identify an extremely vulnerable household, those clients will be immediately prioritized. So we have an assessment, and when you do that assessment with a client based on their scores, it will let you know if that client or that household would be considered an extremely vulnerable household. The other tool that we have is called the Housing Problem Solving Housing Assessment. This is a conversation that you would have with a client to explore all the different options and supports and what might be causing barriers to their housing. We would be able to support those clients with rapid exit or prevention from becoming homeless through a one-time financial assistance. This assistance can pay for moving costs or it can pay for eviction avoidance. You would complete the housing assessment and develop housing goals to identify pathways out of homelessness. And also, if the client chooses to use the housing problem solving funds, that we would be able to set them up for success so they would not in the future face another housing crisis. Next slide. So, how do you, as a CAS assessor, access these resources? So, really important when you are working with a client or people might come up and ask, how do I access shelter? You would want them to call 211. Second part, please remember to remind them to press 8. That way they get connected with a CAS specialist. Those CAS specialists are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. 211 does not take any days off. And so we appreciate their partnership. We appreciate their availability to the community. Currently, some other access points that are in development at this time is actual physical access points that a client can go to on their own and meet with the case manager or navigator. The other thing that we're working on is a virtual app for youth so that youth are able to reach out and find those resources and any other options of things that they might be looking for. So those two are in the works. We're happy to see them come to fruition. But like with all new things, it takes time and lots of different hoops to jump through. So, CAS assessors. This is staff that is trained by SSF. SSF is Sacramento Steps Forward. And we are going to train you how to administer these CAS assessments. Currently, we have about 600 active CAS assessors in Sacramento. And we're hoping to see that number grow because it looks like there's about another 140 people joining today's training. You have to attend this training and pass the annual certification requirements to stay a CAS assessor. And what we expect from the CAS assessors is to be able to support your clients through agency activities such as outreach, shelter, or providing them information on drop-in centers. Next slide. So, as a CAS assessor, you have some responsibilities. Those responsibilities are very important, not just to you, but also to the clients that you're working with. Next slide. So, some of the some of your responsibilities, and we see the little yellow tab. So these questions will be on your quiz. So you might want to pay special attention. So some of your responsibilities as a CAS assessor is you will read each question on the assessment without changing or adding questions. Your assessments must be conducted in a confidential setting. That's to protect the privacy of your client, but there's also some questions that could be triggering for clients on these assessments, and we want them to feel safe and answer those questions honestly. Answers must not be intentionally changed to alter the client's score. A client's answer should not change after the assessment has been completed. If a client's situation changes significantly, then a new assessment should be conducted to ensure that responses accurately reflect the circumstances they're in currently. If a client has difficulty understanding the questions, please offer reasonable accommodations to ensure that they can fully participate and provide the most accurate responses. Next slide. Assessment scores should not be shared with the client. Rather, you should explain the purpose of the assessment and how it informs the housing plan, the ISP, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this training. Please do not guarantee specific housing timeframes or make any promises regarding housing availability. If you do that and things don't fall into the plan, you will lose that client's trust. And we don't want to make promises that we cannot keep. If you suspect an issue with the assessment record, perhaps in HMIS, the score appears too low based on the client's responses, report this discrepancy to the CAS or HMIS staff so that they can further review it and figure out why the error is happening. Next slide. You want to build on your trauma-informed care and motivational interviewing skills. We have trainings on our website that could help you with this, or you can Google different types of trainings. But these two, trauma-informed and motivational interviewing skills, will help you be a better assessor. We definitely want you to be committed to professional development. We have different trainings, like I said, on our website. And we also do offer another resource called the Frontline Collaborative, which we will talk about a little bit later in this training. We want to be sure that you help clients understand the purpose, the use, and potential outcomes of the assessments that you provide. Please treat all your clients equally, respectfully, and fairly. Disclose any potential conflicts of interest. And most of all, please do not discriminate based on race, color, religion, origin, ancestry, disability, age, gender, or sexual orientation. Next slide. We want you to please practice cultural humility. Please report to CAS or HMIS any observed unethical behavior or policy violations. Please uphold the highest standards of professional conduct in your CAS assessor role. Do not condition the administration of CAS assessments in any way that do not align with the CAS policies and procedures. Uphold and protect client rights related to privacy and confidentiality. And remember, you are responsible for developing an individualized housing focused support plan, an ISP, after completing a housing assessment with any client. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit later in this training. Next slide. Please adhere to emergency procedures for client safety and crisis intervention. If a client is identified as an extremely vulnerable household, an EVH, escalate their case appropriately to ensure immediate support in navigating crisis and housing resources. And we'll talk about EVH and how to do those type of referrals and how to escalate them a little bit later. Do not use the HMIS system to defraud or attempt to defraud federal, state, or local governments, individual entities, or to engage in any illegal activities. Your HMIS activities will be subject to regular monitoring, and it may be required to undergo site-based monitoring. Please be open to feedback and support clients in submitting grievances. Next slide. So, pop quiz. I'm going to ask that you drop your answers in the chat. And let's see how well you were listening. So, our first question, is it okay to skip the individualized housing focused support plan when you're completing an assessment? Is that true or false? Perfect. Oh, lots of good answers. And you guys are putting it in the chat so fast, I can barely read people's names. So, yeah, it looks like you were all listening perfectly. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. We'll move on to to question number 2. You are responsible for asking the questions exactly as they are written on all the assessments. Is that true or false? I see Pamela and Anna and Cynthia and Becky. Excellent. You guys are good students. Perfect. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So some of the resources as a CAS assessor are what we're going to go over in this section of the training. Next slide. So some of the resources that you have is emergency shelters. Currently in the CAS system, we have 15 emergency shelters with about 1,000 shelter units. We call them units because sometimes there's more than one bed in a room. We are able through these shelters to serve families, individual adults, and also youth in these different shelters. We also provide you as CAS assessors access to housing problem solving funds. This is the financial assistance to support in acquiring market rate housing or to help clients avoid eviction and stay housed. The purpose of CAS is to house people, keep them housed, or get them off the streets into shelter. We do have case management. It is limited. We are able to supply short-term or a type of bridge case management. Sustained long-term case management is in development. Um, we are hoping to be able to provide that in the future, because we all know, as persons who work with our unhoused population, that's a key component of helping them be successful, and that's to provide that long-term case management and support. We do also, as CAS assessors, you will have access to housing supports. So housing navigation, it does require some rental subsidy and or client income. Um, these rental some subsidies are limited, and case management is also limited. We do provide rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and other permanent housing. Next slide. So, as I stated earlier, we have a great partnership with 211. 211 takes all the calls from assessors as well as clients. They would call 211, press 8, and they would be able to speak to a CAS specialist, get connected to shelter, um, those housing problem solving funds, or any other type of resources directly related, that would give options to our unhoused population. These flyers are available, and they're available in 6 different languages. So if you're interested in having some, and posting them in your offices or passing them out to clients that you work with, please let us know, and we'll make sure 211 gets those flyers out to you. Next slide. So some of the resources we offer, like we said, is shelter. And shelter is available to anyone experiencing homelessness tonight. And homelessness includes being outside in a motel paid for by an organization, a respite center, or with friends and family. And that specifically, friends or family, goes to our day clients. Um, some of the shelters that we work with do have specific criteria that 211 has a list of for each shelter. Some of our shelters do not allow 290s. Some do allow children, and others don't. 211 is kept up to date on each shelter that's in the CAS system and what the specific criteria is. So we do prioritize those extremely vulnerable households. Some shelters also go by a geographic preference. Um, that means that you have to be in a specific radius in order to qualify for that shelter. Once that wait list for that shelter has been gone through, and everybody on that list has been contacted or attempted to be contacted, then 211 can pull from out of that geographic area. So currently, we partner with First Step Communities, and they provide to our clients that are waiting to get into shelter, um, what we call navigation and support. These are our coordinated access navigation, which we call them CAN for short. That in order to qualify to work with a navigator, a CAN navigator, you need to be waiting for shelter, and you currently cannot be working with another caseworker or manager. Of course, extremely vulnerable households and families with children, we highly recommend them partnering up with a CAN navigator to connect them to the different resources that are available, but also to support those two highly vulnerable class of clients. We do offer problem solving services. These are for clients that are at risk or currently experiencing homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee a violent situation, or if they're seeking financial assistance. The support must resolve the housing crisis. So if this client is approved for funding to move into a unit or perhaps to avoid eviction, providing these funds, we are hoping would resolve their housing crisis. So we do give priority to clients with those eviction notices because the last thing we want to see is clients losing the housing that they have already obtained. So we also do have COC housing, which is rental subsidies. This is dependent on program. So the clients need to be at risk or currently experiencing homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee a violent situation. Priority is given to the EVH households, high people who have high housing barriers, and also determined by the long length of their time that they have been homeless. Housing navigation. This is provided to at-risk or people who are currently experiencing homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee a violent situation, and currently qualify for LEAP eligibility. And priorities given to clients with case management and a rental subsidy. Next slide. Excuse me. Accessing resource through CAS. So the goal is for the client to be able to reach out to 211, press 8, get triage, and then those clients who are eligible will get referred to crisis resources. They can be connected to the canteen, which provides one-on-one support for those households of clients that are currently on that shelter wait list. Once they get connected to that canteen and a shelter unit opens, then the shelters will complete intakes and make a plan for the housing stability or permanency for these clients that come into their shelters. At Sacramento Steps Forward, we host case conferencing and refer into the COC housing programs. So those clients that are currently on the housing wait list get discussed at case conferencing and get referred into those housing programs. Next, like I said, our goal is to have access and support to clients so that they have the ability to access those resources and housing. And that's what we hope to gain when we're able to open up those access points so that clients have that option of calling 211 or being able to walk in themselves to an access point. Next slide. So CAS processes and tools. Next slide, please. So the extremely vulnerable household, which we say is the EVH policy, helps immediately prioritize those households for the next available and appropriate unit, regardless of their current geographic location. An EVH is defined as individual scoring 6 or more on the, and I'm going to spell out this acronym. The HC2 is the housing crisis tool or the crisis assessment. Families that are scoring 10 plus on the HCT or crisis assessment, those are the two types of scoring that we use to define who is EVH. So why did we develop this policy? It was important for us to consider a person's vulnerability for the most individual shelter placements. It shouldn't be based on where they're located here in Sacramento. If they are vulnerable, they should be able to be placed into shelters over a regular unhoused client. We wanted to improve those case carrying supports for clients and make sure that we're able to engage with them after our initial contact. This policy also helps place households into a shelter when they initially present. They no longer have that frustrating service providers who are seeking to strike while the iron is hot. And it also means that shelter stays can be shortened and don't have to be longer than necessary. Next slide. So once an assessment is completed, the crisis staff will review the client's eligibility and determine if a same-day shelter referral can be made. If the client is unable to be placed into an emergency shelter, the crisis referral staff will explore alternative options until a shelter intake appointment can take place. Once a client is connected to an emergency shelter, the case management staff will support the client in getting them document ready for COC housing options. EVH clients will be prioritized for COC housing options, such as rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. Next slide. So, how do you join CAS? We do have a CAS committee that meets on the second Thursday of the month, and this committee helps oversee the design and implementation of the local CAS system, evaluate how is it functioning, and assesses the impact on improving access and connection to the services within our local homeless response system. Our CAS office hours, you can join Mondays from 2:30 to 3:30, and you can email cas@sacsstepsforward.org. So you always have access to support through CAS. We also have a collaborative called the Frontline Learning Collaborative. This is strictly for our service providers who are doing direct service to our unhoused population. We meet on the first Thursday of the month for frontline workers in the homeless response system. We offer provider spotlights to bring awareness to homeless services. It's a great meeting, a great opportunity to network and to find out about some of the resources in Sacramento. We also do provide case conferencing. This is an action-oriented program improving the coordination among the different service providers to help transition clients into housing swiftly. They operate on a 3-month cycle with weekly meetings. Next slide. So to join HMIS and sign up to be a CAS assessor, you would need to access the request form. You would need to get trained in housing problem solving, and this would be the connection link to the next training for housing problem solving. You can join our mailing list. And of course, for any CAS specific questions or any grievances, you can send those to cas@sacsstepsforward.org. Next slide.
Yeah, before we go on, just a couple of quick reminders. In order to, and these are for the new folks in the room, in order to complete CAS assessments, you need to be certified in HMIS. So that's like a prerequisite. You won't be able to access the assessments that you need that Teresa and Shaitra will be talking about later without your access to HMIS. The HPS, the Housing Problem Solving Registration link, just a heads up. This happens quarterly, and our September training is full. So when you go to the link, you'll see there's an opportunity for November. our 2026 dates are still being scheduled. And that is it. I'm going to go be quiet again.
So this is our time for Q&A. If you have any unanswered questions about CAS, the processes or the tools, we're going to do a deeper dive in the next section. So I'm hoping that some of your answers about the tools will be answered in that portion. But anything, I see there's 2 questions in the Q&A. Jody, are you able to read those to me?
Yes, one question was requesting the 211 flyer, which we will include in your thank you for being here email that you'll get probably before the end of the week. So you'll get that. And the second question was about the HCT, which is our housing conversation tool. That is the first, like, let's get this information in. Actually, our housing conversation tool replaced our VI SPDAT, which was a really fantastic transition. Shaitra will probably talk about that in the next section as well. I'm getting ahead of myself, y'all. The question is, should the HCT be done in the COC and our program both?
So that's a good question. And I think that's probably, I'm pretty sure that that is a question Shaitra is going to be able to answer in the next part of our training. So stay tuned, keep that question up so that if it is not touched on, we can circle back with Shaitra and hopefully get that answer out to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Teresa. The other question is a family for EVH, extremely vulnerable household, refer to children and minors, or would a wife husband be considered a family?
So for us in CAS, a family would be considered an adult with a child under 18 or children under 18. That's what a family would consist of in all of CAS across the board.
Wonderful. And that's it for our open questions at the moment. We can take a break. We will take a break. We'll take a break for about 7 minutes. We'll be back at 10:42 to be exact. During our break, please feel free to go back to our training link and register for the remaining 5 trainings in the series. Go get some air, bio break moment, and we will be back at 10:42. So specific, I know. We'll see you soon. Welcome back, everybody, to our CAS Assessor training series. We are moving into our second part with Shaitra Ken. We will be discussing CAS best practices. And please continue to use the Q&A feature. It's very helpful to elevate questions at the end of the training. The best practices section is going to be really brief and an overview to help you better understand the HCT, which is what was referenced, which Teresa referenced. It's the housing conversation tool. Chaitra will also talk about and review best practices for the different assessments and planning effort to help ensure compliance, effective data management, and of course, to support your clients. And I will turn it over to Shaitra. Thanks for being here. Shaitra, I cannot hear you, even though you're not on mute. Good times. Nope. Shaitra, maybe just take a quick moment to log back out, to log out and log back in. That might help. And in the interim, you are welcome. I will go off screen and hopefully that will help.
How about now?
Yes, we've got you. Thanks, Shaitra.
Always the good old turn it on, turn it off type of situation. Love it. Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Now that you can hear me, yes, let's jump right into what we're going over today. So yes, understanding the housing conversation tool, also known as the HCT. You'll hear me refer to that a lot. So HCT, HCT, HCT. We're talking about the housing conversation tool. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Jody had mentioned previously, yes, this is the housing conversation tool is the thing that we are replacing, where we have replaced the VI SPDAT. And so basically the VI SPDAT, there was a few issues that's come across the board. So, and like a lot of the main things were that the VI SPDAT promoted racial disparities within our system, and thinking a lot about like equity and things of that sort. We definitely wanted to rethink that. And then the HCT is not designed to understand a household's holistic needs. So that's like in terms of healthcare, in terms of like ADA compliance. And instead of it focuses on triaging and identifying the most urgent cases for intervention while providing a blueprint assessors to develop an individualized service plan. In addition, a work group was formed. So when we were thinking about the VI SPDAT, we're like, okay, we have to redo this. Yeah, we decided to create a work group that consisted of folks who have previously experienced homelessness, are experiencing homelessness, folks of the equity community, and then various partners. So we had service providers who work in the community, SSF as the lead agency was there. So just a lot of different folks who work in the system and who work with these populations was always in mind of making sure that they had input on creating this new tool. And then lastly, it provided change and an opportunity to align resource prioritization, right? So sometimes clients only need a certain thing. And so being able to connect them with the actual resources that they needed. And then, yeah, reset standards for CAS assessor expectations and best practices. Next slide. So the benefits of the housing conversation tool is that, yes, now we have a single tool. So before there were like 4 or 5 different assessments, and now we have one tool. So it's for all household types, and it's the previous where the housing assessment tools have been combined. So we used to have an FYI assessment. We used to have a permanent housing versus just a regular housing assessment. So many assessments out there. So yeah, they're allowed for a broader applicability. So we're able to reach across all types of households. So folks who are experiencing homelessness, some folks who are at risk of homelessness, some folks who are experiencing domestic violence. We're able to capture them all here. And then we have fewer questions and trauma-informed phrasing. So previously there were some questions that were questionable, and so yeah, we wanted to make sure that we weren't also providing redundancies in certain questions. So being able to limit those has been very helpful. And it was designed with a human-centered and racial equity focus. Again, we had those folks in our meetings to be able to provide more of that human-centered aspect that we needed when we're getting into these very deep conversations about people's experience. And then developed by people with lived expertise of homelessness with broad community feedback. And then only available under the CAS Assessor agency. So that was the question that was asked earlier. So yes, you can only do the CAS to do the housing conversation tool in the CAS Assessor agency. You can't even do it in your other programs. So that is good to know. Next slide, please. All right, so CAS assessments and best practices. So the housing conversation tool is just one of them, and we'll jump deeper into some other ones that will be helpful for you as your role as a CAS assessor. Next slide. So there's a there's a CAS assessor best practice guide. So there is a link in this, which you'll be able to get these slides later on from the training team, and it is a very comprehensive manual of best practice guide. So this training is more of a brief overview of best practices, but if you want to get into the nitty-gritties of all the good stuff, then definitely read through the manual. It covers information in more detail than this training, and it is intended to be a resource, especially for new staff. So if you have a question, definitely able to go here first to see if you can find it, which more than likely. And then it also includes a resource guide in the appendix to help folks connect clients to appropriate programs and services. So that is something that we always got is like, how do I get connected to this? What resources do you have for this? So using that to utilize resources that you may not already have in your arsenal will be very helpful. Next slide. So the CAS assessment summary. So the CAS assessors will utilize three primary primary assessments. That's the crisis assessment. So the crisis assessment is anyone who is seeking shelter, problem-solving access funds. So those are folks who like may be losing housing, and then also case management programs. You would need to have a crisis assessment. And then the housing conversation tool is for folks who are trying to get access to the CAS housing programs that we have. And then as well, you have the individual support plan. And so this is for developing and providing updates on housing related goals and activities. And then there are two more at the bottom that are more so optional, but they are very helpful, which is the case conferencing tool, which is for collaborative information between providers and CAS about a client's journey in housing. And then so it adds a lot more context than the housing conversation tool does of what's going on with the client. And then you also have the current living situation, which is pretty helpful for you to be able to identify that a client is experiencing homelessness. So it's able to identify that in our system, which is pretty helpful when we're trying to look for chronicity for clients. Okay, next slide. So just a quick map here, the CAS assessment resource map. So just a simple question, does your client need shelter? Then the assessments you should be doing is a current living situation and a crisis assessment. Client needs housing resources. You should be doing a current living situation, a housing conversation tool, an individual support plan, and a case conferencing tool. And lastly, if clients are seeking homeless prevention, then you would be doing a current living situation and then a crisis assessment. So as a quick map of what does my client need, these are the assessments that you would use. Next slide. So how to administer CAS assessments? Well, one, it's always great in any situation with the clients that we serve is to develop rapport and trust through trauma-informed practices. And as Jody mentioned before, there is going to be an HSP training, which will be able, you can learn more about informed trauma practice. Then, of course, you want to conduct with empathy, right? Being able to see your client as a person, as a human who's just experiencing a really hard time, being able to have empathy for that. Address crises before conducting the HCT. So the HCT can get pretty deep into a person's experience. So maybe handling anything that you can prior to get them as comfortable and as stable to be able to do the housing conversation tool is a great suggestion. Conduct in a safe and confidential environment. Again, we are talking about people's experience here. So want to make sure that they feel safe and that what's being shared with you isn't being shared with everyone. Explain the purpose of the assessment and how it will be used. It is always important for people to know why they're doing something. So definitely explaining why this is important and how this will help them is super important. And then lastly, second to last, do not guarantee housing or services. As we know, this is a system. We have to be mindful that we can't promise anything to folks because we don't know what the timelines look like. So just maybe giving vague timelines, being very honest about like their probability, possibility, and things of that sort. And then lastly, escalate extremely vulnerable clients appropriately. So whenever you have the chance to escalate extremely vulnerable clients, just as a reminder, that's anyone who has a vulnerability score as an individual is a 6 or higher, or a family as a 10 or higher. It is supremely important to try to escalate them as appropriately as possible. Okay, so now we're going to talk about each assessment. So the first one we have is a crisis assessment. Simply, this replaces the shelter survey that we used to have. Now we have this. So this can assist with determining PSAP's eligibility if that's something that your client wants to move forward with. Usable with at-risk and households experiencing homelessness. So we can capture all of those populations. And then one assessment for families and individuals. So before there used to be 2 assessments, now there's only 1 assessment. And then responses will cascade into the HCT up to 60 days, which simply means that a lot of the questions that are on the crisis assessment are also on the HCT. So instead of you having to redo those questions, they'll cascade over, meaning that they will move over there as well. So you don't have to answer all of the same questions again, which is really nice. So if you do a CAR, first, trying to get them into shelter, right? This is that idea of escalating, trying to get them into shelter first. Then you do the HCT, it'll automatically upload the same questions. They'll answer it the same way. And then there is an HMIS job aid, a part of this slide. So that's going to be supremely helpful in being able to give you really detailed steps of how to conduct the crisis assessment. Next step, next slide. Ooh, and I go back. This has a bookmark there, so that means that some of the questions may or may not on for the quiz that you'll have later on be on this slide. So pay a lot of attention to this one. Okay, I'm going to just go through this one. Crisis assessment details who completes it. A CAS assessor, right? The folks who finish this training will be able to have access to this. What is the info that is captured? Vulnerabilities, housing barriers, shelter eligibility, prevention services, pre-screening, and then supportive services as well. And when does it get completed? If a client is experiencing a housing crisis and experiencing an interest in shelter, prevention services, or any other services or support services, definitely a CAR assessment should be done. And then how is this assessment used? Well, it's determine eligibility for shelter and supportive services. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the housing conversation tool. Like I said before, this replaces the VI SPDAT. It can assist with determining housing program eligibility. So a lot of questions that we got from folks was, what programs can my clients get into? What are they eligible for? I don't know. There's a really cool aspect of this that allows you to know which programs based off of the answers in the housing conversation tool that your client is eligible for. So if it's 100 or more across the name, then you know your client is eligible for that program. It's usable with at-risk and households experiencing homelessness. So again, we're able to capture more folks. And then one assessment for families and individuals. So again, before we used to have 2 assessments, now there's only 1. And there is a HMIS job aid where you can find all the details about how to do this assessment in more detail. Next slide. Okay, so housing conversation tool details. Who completes it? CAS assessors. What info is captured? Vulnerabilities, housing barriers, housing eligibility, and then supportive services needs. And then when does it get completed? If a client is experiencing a housing crisis and is determined that the client would need added resources for housing stability. So if any time that your client is expressed an interest, or you're also witnessing that the client needs extensive housing need, definitely do a housing conversation tool. And how is this assessment used? It helps us to determine eligibility for housing and for supportive services for housing. Next slide. All right, so some of the other ones that are very helpful, and this one is actually mandatory if you do it HCT, is the individual support plan details. So this simply reflects the client's preferences and provides a structured approach to achieving their housing goal. So sometimes the question is, well, what now, right? So being able to sit with your client and discuss what are their options moving forward and how you as a CAS assessor are going to work with them to get there. And this can also change, which is really nice. So it isn't set in stone, but it is a good way of starting the conversation of like, this is what we can do, and this is what we will do. And then it also establishes a support team tailored to the client's needs. So as you're working as a CAS assessor to get this client like holistic help, you can look at this list as a way of helping you determine what's needed, right? So there's a section for it's like primary case manager, who is the peer support person, who is going to be the physical health team, behavioral health team, other support team. So it's the idea of like you're able to add folks here and also have them here to be able to work together to figure out how best to help this client. And then it's updated as needed. So it's based on changes in the client situations or goals. So you don't have to do it every time, but it is good to do it often enough. So at least one time you should do it. And then as it's needed, if something changes, like goals changes, maybe they get a voucher, maybe they were able to establish more income, right? We go back to the ISP and be able to adjust it as we need it. Next slide. So the individual who completes it, only CAS assessors. What info is captured? Connected to clients, defined roles, gap analysis and case management services, housing goals and barriers. When does it get completed? Immediately after completing the housing conversation tool. So if you do a housing conversation tool, even if it's a new one, then you should definitely be going back and completing it or updating it. Whenever there are changes in care or housing goal updates. And then how is this assessment used? This is used as a community tool for providers connected with the client. So again, we're talking about building the team. It's the community that mainly uses it. Okay, next slide. So then we have our beautiful case conferencing tool. So this is a collaborative tool for providers and the CAS staff. So this is something that usually our CAS team also works in, our case conferencing team. Also, our housing team uses this a lot as well in terms of figuring out if people are open to shared housing, if people like what type of barriers people are experiencing that is maybe not captured in the HCT. So we could be more mindful of housing options that we offer folks. And then just thinking of of other barriers that might come up. And it also provides a space where you can get some input from what staff is looking at in terms of doc readiness for clients. And then there is a really cool job aid as well that's also linked in this slide that tells you how to do the case conferencing tool, what your parts are. There are parts that are specifically for the providers, and then there's parts that are specifically for SSF staff. Next slide. So the case conferencing details, who completes it, CAS assessors. So mainly like case managers, people who are working with the client more consistently would complete this as you have more context to be able to bring to the client's journey. What info is captured? Providers working with the client, barriers, context around needs and current situations, and then document readiness status. When does it get completed? Anytime. So anytime is a great time. How is this assessment used? To communicate the journey and the status of the client in terms of housing. Next slide. Okay, and then we have the beautiful current living situation, which is also called the CLS. The CLS provides an update on the client situation and is needed to document homeless chronicity and determine location based on eligibility. So whenever you're doing a homeless status timeline on HMIS, being able to do the CLS helps us to determine, okay, this client experienced homelessness. So even if you only do a CLS once a month, it's okay. It will count the whole month. So that's why it's usually like not a requirement, but a suggestion that you do a CLS monthly so that we're able to count that the client is experiencing homelessness in our system. And then again, HMIS, of course, is so great at their job aids. We have a job aid here for you about how to do the CLS and the importance that it has in our system. Next slide. So who completes it? CAS Assessors. What info is captured? Account of the witnessing the clients experiencing homelessness. So you as CAS Assessor, you're seeing this. And then just a general location. And then when does it get completed? Anytime. So anytime you meet with a client, this is a great time to be able to do it, but we ask minimally that you do it once a month. And then how is this assessment used? To keep the clients active in the CAS agency, and then add data points to verify chronicity of homelessness. Next slide. All right, pop quiz. So we're going to answer the questions in the poll. So the first question is, as a CAS assessor, CAS assessors should not explain how assessments or CAS works. It's better if the client doesn't understand how complicated the system is. And then the second question is, as a CAS assessor, it is permissible to change the client's assessment answers so you can get your clients housed quicker. We'll leave a few seconds for you to reread and figure out which is the best answer.
We have just another 15 seconds, and we're just at about 65% answered. Wonderful. Almost at 75%. And that is time. Thanks for answering the poll. I'll share the results.
Yeah, so the answer is false, right? We want our clients to know what is happening to them, and it's always better that they understand what's going on. So as best as you can try to, I don't know where to simplify, but the best you can try to like explain to them how this works is definitely the answer. So the answer was false. As a CAS assessor, is it permissible to change the client's assessment answers so you can get your client's house quicker? This is false. We do not want to just be changing answers to try to elevate clients. We want the answers to reflect what's going on with the client's experience, right? At the end of the day, it's all based off of prioritization. And I understand that there is a need to get your clients rehoused or put into shelter. Obviously, we want to do that as much as possible, but we also want to be honest and accurate about how they are showing up in our system. All right. Great job, y'all. Fantastic work. So I think we're going to move on now. Okay, so we have our CAS assessment user agreement. So this is something that as a CAS assessor, you will be required to sign. And simply it is all staff who wish to remain in CAS assessors must sign and return this form. That is a requirement. Outlines the CAS assessor's responsibilities and code of ethics. So how we expect CAS assessors to work in our system. And then initial and read each section carefully. So just take your time. And this is automated and can be signed digitally. Yay, so you don't have to like upload a PDF and all that jazz. That's nice. And then covers all CAS assessments and assessors' responsibilities, not just the housing conversation tool, which is great because as a CAS assessor, you have access to so much in this system that it's going to cover everything and not just maybe one aspect that you'll use the most. Next slide. Okay, so do you have any unanswered questions about CAS processes or tools? So this is that beautiful Q&A section.
Yes, and there are some.
Go ahead. Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, go for it. You can see the Q&A, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So from Maryland, Washington, I have a question, the same question for ISP. Where is it completed in the COC? Our programs or both? Correct. So this completed in COC agency. So you have to be in the COC agency and then be in the COC um, agency, and then yeah, the program itself, and then go to assessments, and it'll show up there. Is there a PDF form for the HCT that we can access? No, there is currently not a PDF form that we have. I guess it wouldn't be hurt to get it. So yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we can make that as a resource that's available to folks. And then how, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to jump in here. We have gotten that question frequently, a PDF for the HCT, because it is conditional responses. It's really tough to, like, if they answer this, then the next question pops up. So that's been a challenge. I think maybe if we're looking at the most high level questions, potentially, but that is why a current PDF does not exist.
Smart. How often is the HCT completed? So minimally, it must be completed every 15 months. However, whenever there is any significant life changes in the client's experience, so maybe they have a child and so the household has expanded, or maybe they have a partner and the household has expanded, maybe they've gotten income, and so now the income can go either higher or they've lost income. Those are things as well. Maybe they've experienced certain kinds of traumas or medical experiences. You can also update it then. So any significant change, we definitely want to update it. And then CLS monthly, where are these assessments done? So the CLS is also done in the coordinated access system, and I believe you can also do it in your program itself. This will be in assessments. So it says the current living situation, so it should be done monthly. And then again, in the slides, there is a job aid on how to do it. So when Jody sends this to you, you'll be able to access it there. And then it's also on our website on the job aids. What is the difference between CAS and HMIS? Love this question. So HMIS is the actual system that we use to be able to manage our population and the folks and what's going on. CAS refers to like the operation side, more so like the housing side and the shelter side. So it's the folks who are doing the work to connect people to those resources. So HMIS is just the tool that we use. And then CAS is the system itself in terms of connecting folks to resources.
I'm going to jump in on the ISP question because it
Go ahead.
seemed like there wasn't the exact clarity folks were looking for. So next week's training is Intro to HMIS and ISP. So I think sometimes there's so many assessments and we're trying to like figure it all out. Each training is going to build on the next. So Shaitra did a fantastic job of like, here are the main assessments. Next week, Kai and Giselle will also go deeper into this is when you fill out the ISP. This is what the ISP is actually for. This is why we use it. So I feel like those questions will be answered with a little more clarity. And Kai is really wonderful at also explaining you enter HMIS and then you see a drop down, right? That's the CAS agency I think we're referring to here. Someone asked about the COC. It's actually called the CAS agency, right? And it's the Sacramento CAS agency specific. And when you pull that down, then you'll see the assessments that you're able to use. And that's the connection there. So I am no expert here, but y'all, I've sat in on every training. So I'm starting to learn like, oh yeah, this question comes up frequently. So I just wanted to add that with the hopes of maybe a touch of clarification and trust that there's more information coming as well. And the HMIS job aids, you can access them over on the HMIS tab on our website. How can we help you? I think is one of the questions, and you scroll all the way down on the website and you'll see a plethora, one of my favorite words, a plethora of job aids there on pulling reports, on adding clients, on assessments. And they have taken a lot of the questions that y'all share in these trainings and created these wonderful, simple, user-friendly job aids. So they're available like right now. So I wanted to share that with you to make sure we're on the same page. And I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ISP question was not clear. Did we complete the ISP in our agency program and in the CAS? You only have access to it in the Coordinated Access System agency. If something recently changed, can we edit a crisis assessment if the assessment was recently created, or do we have to create a whole new assessment? No, you can update that crisis assessment that time. So you just update a new crisis assessment every 30 days. So if it's within a 30-day period, totally okay to make the change then. How do you know if you have access to HMIS? Well, one way you can check is to go to HMIS and try to put in a login that you think exists. If it doesn't, then you can reach out to HMIS at sacstepsforward.org, sorry. And then you can ask them if you have access and what level of access. And then you can also ask them where to get access. That can also be helpful. So again, the email is hmis@sacstepsforward.org. And then as Jody mentioned previously, we also do have an email, not an email, on our website. If you go to the data tab, it has how to access HMIS there too. Do you sign up for CAS as a company? So we do it by agency, yes. A crisis assessment is needed every 30 days? Yes. Correct, Teresa? Every 30 days minimally?
Yes.
There were questions in the chat.
So I'm going to add, excuse me, to Katrina's question. A crisis assessment is needed every 30 days. So what happens, and I learned this, is that if there's no activity on a client's record, it gets booted out. And then you're like, you go to log in on day 31 and you're like, where's my client information, right? Because that's HMIS. That is not SSF. That is HMIS. SSF manages HMIS, but HMIS has their own settings that some of this particular one is out of our control. So this is why you're asked as assessors that are working with clients to update every 30 days. Yeah.
I see a question here. Can we still update the HCT for clients enrolling into shelter and update the primary staff and any changes to the cascaded responses? Yes, of course. Right, as we know, maybe clients might get their crisis assessment done by someone in outreach, but then they get a case manager who does ongoing case management with them, and then they'll do the housing conversation tool. So totally okay to change it as accurately as you need it to be. If someone has changed in a crisis assessment, do we do a brand new assessment, or can we edit the recent assessment if it has not been past 90 days? So again, the crisis assessment, we want it for 30 days. And yes, you can edit that crisis assessment. Oh, sorry. Well, Teresa, you had a question.
Nope.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, I think I see more questions.
Yes.
There are 2 assessment sections in HMIS. We are utilizing the assessments under the CAS or the top of the profile, or at the top of the profile. Oh, okay, yes. So there are 2 assessment sections, yes. So you want to go into the Coordinated Access Program. And when you go into that program, it'll give you So it'll be the bottom one. So there's like a top assessments, and then you go to the bottom assessments where the program is on the program level. And then you go into that assessment, and it should give you about 6 assessments possibly, I think, that you'll be able to get access to. And again, if you're trying to access these, if you use the job aids, it'll show you exactly how to do it with pictures and all that jazz. If something recently changed, okay, I already answered that. What does the process look like when escalating an extremely vulnerable individual to CAS? So I would say the escalation part is mainly in the shelter side. There's no way to truly escalate folks in the housing side. So if you want to speak to that, Teresa.
Sure. 211 does have a backline, and I believe the phone number was on the slide. So as an assessor, you would be able to reach out to 211, pressing 8, speaking to a CAS specialist. You would do kind of a warm handoff, talk about the client, and then 211 and the assessor would look for different options for this EVH client. There are some systems in place. 211 is aware of those systems. And they do their very best to get that EVH client into shelter just as quickly as possible. And they also, like we had talked about in the slides, have that option to connect a CAN navigator to that EVH person or family so that they can continue to support them and then also be able to get them into shelter just as rapidly as possible. Thank you for that number. It's in the chat.
So maybe there's another question for you as well. So if a client is enrolled in a shelter, crisis assessments don't need to be done every 30 days?
Again, if there's a drastic change in their situation, added a family, got rid of a family or person in a household, income change, anything that's going to drastically change their situation, that case manager should probably do a new crisis assessment just to keep track of the different changes the client is going through. It can affect whether or not they get to stay in shelter based on the current situation, but it's always best to have the most current up-to-date information in the client's HMIS profile.
Yeah, agreed. Like, especially when it comes to the contact information, please have that as updated as possible, or even like a next of kin who can get in contact with the client. Yes, awesome. The next question is, where will we be able to find the recording from this training once it's available? So this will be available on our website. So there'll be like a Q3 training, and then it'll have the same way that it is where previously there's Q2 training. So it will be available on the website. And Jody is always super great about this, about following up with people via email, and then also checking out any of like the newsletters that come out as well. I'm sure those are a great resource to be able to check these out as well.
Thanks, Shaitra. Yes, at the very bottom, like where you go to register for this training, if you scroll down, you'll see like a second tab that says resources. That's where this recording will be, this slide deck will be, and along with the additional trainings, some of the trainings provide additional materials. They will be there as well. And it usually takes SSF, I'm going to say about a week. Our process is pretty tight at this point, that hopefully by the end of the week, the work will be there. However, we are currently in a website redevelopment program, so we want to give them some grace and space to not hurry up, but it'll be there. And it looks like that's it for the questions at the moment. I want to make sure there aren't any additional questions in the chat. Teresa, did you see any additional questions?
I did not. I think Shahid
Okay,
got them all.
I think we're good. All right, two more things. Please complete the training survey at the end. You're going to exit. A survey should pop up for you. And please provide any feedback and comments to help us continue to develop these trainings for you. And drop in any suggestions that you may have. I read every comment and I do my best to incorporate your suggestions. So your voice matters to us. So please provide your feedback. And please don't forget to register for the next 5 trainings. We did mention earlier in this deck, we talked about trauma-informed practices. That is covered extensively with, I believe it's either an hour or 75-minute training on its own, as well as motivational interviewing will be our final training, and we call it our introduction to conversational case management. Our housing problem solving training that is in person also goes extensively into motivational interviewing and problem solving in a really conversational way. It's a wonderful training. I do know our September is full, but there is space in November as well. And of course, we'll be scheduling 2026 soon. And that is it for me. That is all the final pieces. Shaitra and Teresa, thank you so much for your work in helping us produce the slides and inspiring and empowering our CAS assessors to do all the wonderful things that they do. Thanks for being here, everybody, and we'll see you next week.